Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the factors of production, and today we're going to see how that plays out on a graph when we have to measure how many products we can make when we're limited with our resources. So we're going to look at something called the production possibilities curve, which will help us understand how decisions are made when you own a business or you want to start a business. It'll help us understand how decisions are made as far as what you're going to produce and how much of it you're going to produce. Now, this is the definition from the book. All right, let's read that out. A diagram that shows various combinations of goods and services an economy can produce when all its resources are in use. Okay, so that's a mouthful. Let's see if we can't break that down into shorthand or paraphrase it in a way that I would want you to do it in your notes. Okay, first of all, production possibilities curve is 3 words. I mean, that's a phrase. We don't really need to keep repeating that over and over and over again in our notes. So what you might want to do is something like this. Oops. Production possibilities curve equals what? I would just abbreviate it. Say P, P, C. Okay? That way you know what that is. So every time that you write out in your notes, or you're talking about the production possibility curve in your notes, all you got to do is write PPC. Now, what? What does it equal? Well, let's go back to the definition. Okay, a diagram that shows various combination of goods and services that an economy can produce when all its resources are in use. All right, well, when I look at that and I think about the most important parts of that definition that tell me what it means, hopefully you guys see the same thing. I don't need to put diagram down, okay, or that shows. What's most important here is we're dealing with the topics, the combination of goods and services, okay, that an economy can produce when all its resources are in use, okay. This is what I would include on the end, when all its resources are in use. Now, do I need to write those phrases out in my notes? If you get a handout on this, am I going to insist that you actually write down when all its resources are in use? Let me go back to my notepad and show you what I would write. This is what I would write. All combinations of output and a slash with full resources. Okay, now that is something I would accept on a handout, or when I have you start doing this on your own, in your own notes. Okay, and it should jar in your head the most important facts about the production possibilities curve, that it shows us all combinations of output of 2 products, okay, with full resources, meaning that you're using all the resources at your disposal in order to make those products. Okay, so let's see how this works. That's the production possibilities curve. Sorry about the chair noise. All right, so if you're freaking out because it's a graph, and you remember me telling you that there wasn't going to be any math, don't worry about it. There's not going to be any math with this. All we're going to do is learn how to read this chart and what these particular points mean. By the way, that's the only reason why you have a chart. I mean, my algebra teacher never explained that to me, why you use a graph. You're only using it to measure 2 different things, Doesn't matter what it is, but you're looking at two different sets of data to try to compare and contrast one thing to another. And that's what this is. So, on the bottom, I'll do this in green, we have the x-axis, and going up and down, we have the y-axis. And why do we have two axes? Because we're measuring what are we measuring? We're looking at the amount of guns that can be produced, and that's on the y-axis here, versus the amount of butter that can be produced, and that's on the x-axis down here. So let me choose another color here. Let's use good old black. The further we go to the right to get underneath a point, whether it's A or C or D, see, we're right underneath these points. The further we have to go to the right to get underneath these points, that's the more butter that we're actually producing. And it works the other way around. Erase. Okay, the higher that we have to go on the x-axis, the y-axis, to become even with these points, whether it's A or B or D, that means that we are making more guns. Okay, so let's look at point B, which is right here. Hopefully it's not too fuzzy. Now, I'm going to divide this up into different colors. We'll stick with blue for butter, and we'll stick with green for guns. Now, if I start at 0, and I go to the right on the x-axis, I stop right there, right? And I'm underneath, directly underneath the B, okay? Now, let's change color. If I want to measure the number of guns that I produced, I have to go up on the y-axis, and I stop when I get there. So, this is how you read this, okay? And you ask yourself, what did you produce more of? Did you produce more butter, or did you produce more guns at point B? Okay, let's do another one. Let's do point A, which I will circle right here. And let's look at the amount of butter that we can produce. So we're going to start at 0, and we're going to go right until we're directly underneath, or about even with that point, point A. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with guns. We're going to start at 0, and we're going to go as far up on the y-axis we can go until we're about even with point A, which is right there. Now, same question. Did we produce more butter than guns, more guns than butter, or about the same? This might help if I join the points up here. What do you think? Are we making equal amounts of guns and butter at this point? Okay, now let's look at point C. And some of you might be already anticipating what we're going to do with this. So let's figure that out. If we start here, this is, and go all the way over to the right until we get underneath C, that is the amount of butter that we can produce with our current resources. Now, can we produce many guns when we're producing that much butter? Well, if we start at 0 and we go up until we're even with C, we have to stop there. So, which line is longer? the butter line or the gun line. Okay, if it helps you to connect all the way to the dot over here, then we'll do that. But it looks like if we're making a whole lot of butter, we're only making a little bit of guns. Now, a couple other things that we should talk about, all right? We have another point D here, and we looked at B already, and then we have X, right? And then we have this blue line, okay, that goes all the way down like this, all right? So this is what I want you to understand. Any point that you put on this line, which is called the production possibilities curve, or frontier, excuse me, the production possibilities frontier. Any point that you put on that line, okay, whether it's here, 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 or here, you are using your full resources, and you're producing some combination of guns and butter, okay? Now, any point that falls within the curve, I mean, the frontier, excuse me, okay, if you plot a point here, you're not using your full resources, okay? Because you can make more butter than you're making, and you can make more guns than you're making. How much more? Well, you could go all the way up here, but then your butter is going to shrink. Or you could take your butter and go all the way out here, and then your guns are going to shrink, okay? Any point that you plot that is left of the curve, you are not using your full resources. Okay, now, if you decide, oops, that's not erasing. Okay, if you decide to try to make this amount, actually, let me bring that back. Color, go blue, okay. If you decide to make this amount of butter, okay, so that you're right underneath the X, and you decide to make this amount of guns, okay, so that you're right next to the X, here's my question. First of all, are you inside or outside of the curve? That's the first question. The next question is this. Is it possible to make both this much guns and this much butter? Do you have the resources to do that? If you're outside of the curve, you don't. Okay, this is an impossibility with the amount of guns and butter resources that we have. Anything right of the curve is impossible.